Hey everyone, my name is Brianna. I am the field manager at Planned Parenthood North Central States, and I'm going to talk to you today about how to engage your legislators. So before we really jump into the skills that you need, I want to just level set and make sure we're all on the same page. Why is it important to engage your legislators? Well, I think we're all here because we at some point have some connection to sexual and reproductive health care or rights. And legislators make decisions on those things every single year. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're things that might expand access to sexual and reproductive health care, but other times they're bad and they're things that might limit access to sexual and reproductive health care. So for an example, the last full legislative session we had, we saw a whole bunch of bills that would either expand or restrict or affect access to sexual and reproductive health care in some way. This includes things like a Protect Access to Contraception Act, which would have expanded access to health insurance coverage for birth control in Minnesota. It included things like a 20-week ban on abortion was introduced. There were bills that would have increased funding to Family Planning Special Projects Grant, which is basically a grant that clinics like Planned Parenthood and other family planning clinics get to help provide services on a sliding fee scale for folks. They also made decisions about bills on things like comprehensive sex education across the state of Minnesota, on things like paid family leave. So every year they make a whole bunch of different decisions on bills that would affect access to sexual and reproductive health care. And so we need to make sure that our legislators are making informed, engaged decisions in this. So that's why it's really important to talk to your legislator. So I know this might be intimidating, but I'm going to promise you a few different things. One, your legislator is not an expert at any of these issues. I think we sometimes put legislators on a pedestal and think they know everything, but before they're elected, they're people like you and me, and we all know that we don't know everything and we're not experts on every single issue or policy out there, right? They're the exact same. So many of these people are elected without knowing anything about access to sexual and reproductive health care, without knowing anything about how healthcare providers provide these services or what services they provide. Without knowing anything whatsoever about these issues. And so it can seem really intimidating to talk to your legislator, but I promise you, you are the expert in the room. By being here, you know more than most legislators do as a starting point. The other thing to keep in mind when you're talking to your legislator is that their job is to listen to you. They are elected to serve their constituents, and so it is literally their job to listen to you. Don't be intimidated by them. They will listen to you, and they will be nice about it. And if they're not doing their job right. Another thing that I think people don't know right away when they want to engage their legislator is how much of an impact it makes. Talking to your legislator can make a huge impact. And a lot of people think that if they just make a call or send an email or something simple like that it doesn't make an impact at all, and that's false. A lot of legislators have their staff set up in a way where they answer the phone calls, go through the email messages, listen to the voicemail. And what they do is every day they'll have a kind of spreadsheet. And basically they will keep tallies of what issues they hear about from the constituents, kind of for, against, pros and cons, and they'll keep tallies. So they might have a sheet that's about sexual and reproductive health care. And they might have a in support of or a in opposition to this bill kind of thing going on. And so every time you contact them, you're another tally in that spreadsheet And those are definitely given to the legislators, and the legislators look at that. So if a legislator sees that there is, an issue that has 100 people emailing them in support of it, that's going to stand out, especially if they have 2 people emailing them in opposition to it. So even a tiny, simple outreach to your legislator does make a little bit of a difference. The other thing that I want to reassure you before we really start talking about the skills you need to do this is that when you originally contact your legislator, if you call them to set up a meeting or just to leave a voicemail, or if you email them, really you're probably going to talk to a staff person first. Their job as a staff person really is almost like customer service. Their job is to listen to you, take down the message, and relay it. It's a lot less intimidating when you know that the person that you're going to be talking to is probably someone who's very young, just starting out their political career, and their whole job is just to listen to you. So keep that in mind too when you're contacting your legislator and trying to engage them. So now that you know how unintimidating it is to contact your legislator and why it's important, you're probably thinking, that's great, but who do I contact? How do I contact them? So we're going to go through that real quickly. Let's make sure that you first know who your legislators are. So there is a website, it is listed on the screen here. It is the Minnesota State Legislature website. And they have this cool tool called Who Represents Me. So you can just type in your address, and what it'll do is it'll populate your legislators. Everything from your Minnesota state legislator all the way up to your U.S. senator. So you can see everyone who represents you. And then what it'll also do is give you an opportunity to contact them. So right across from their picture, as you can see on the screen, is a little contact icon, and that'll give you things like their email address, their phone number. If they have a contact form that they prefer to use, it'll redirect you to that. So it'll give you kind of all the tools you need to contact them. So now you know who your legislators are. There are a variety of different ways to contact your legislators. You can attend a town hall. So town halls, for those of you who don't know, town halls are generally meetings that your legislator might hold, where they might have it in a big auditorium or in a gym or something in your community, and everyone can come. And they'll usually start off with a little bit of a speech about them, but then the whole idea is that you can ask questions as an audience member. You can stand up, ask them questions, and they will respond. So it's a really good way to ask 1 or 2 questions of your legislator in a really quick non-super intimidating form. If you don't want to do that, if you want to do something that's not in person, especially with COVID-19 right now, you have options to write emails and letters. Like I said before, this is something that is taken into account. It is tallied, and you usually will get a response. It'll probably be a form response, but you will eventually get a response, generally. You can also call your legislator. Again, this is another thing where you're probably going to be talking to their staff person, but by saying that you support or oppose a bill or something, they will again tally that and relay that message to the legislator. If you're really intimidated by this, that's okay. You can always try to call after hours and leave a message. They do check their voicemails, although maybe not as often as they should. So if it's really emergent, try to call during office hours. But if you're really intimidated, feel free to call after office hours. You'll probably be directed to leave a message, and you can leave a message. And I think that's just a lot less intimidating for some people and a lot more accessible. If you're really, really dedicated, one of the most effective ways that you can make change and engage your legislator is by meeting with them in person, either at the Capitol or in what we call in-district meetings, which is more close to home for people who don't live in the metro area. So to set this up, all you have to do is you have to contact your legislator and ask them for a meeting. It's that simple. They will set up a time and a date with you, and they'll tell you where to meet them. Sometimes that'll change because their lives are really busy. But you'll set up a meeting, and then you can go in there and you can tell them what issue you're talking about, why it's important to you, and really have a conversation with them one-on-one. Another way you can contact and engage your legislator is on social media. A lot of legislators are big users of like Twitter, for example, or they might have a Facebook page. Social media is a good way to engage them, especially if you want to get just like a vast number of people engaging someone on an issue. And the one thing that's pretty unique to social media that's not unique to these other tactics that I talked about is with social media, there's also a public kind of impact on it as well, right? So not only is your legislator seeing that, but everyone else in the universe can see it, especially if it's on Twitter. So by tweeting your legislator about an issue, they will see it, but then you also, if you're getting a whole bunch of people tweeting about an issue, you might also get some attention from the press. Or maybe you'll get seen by another legislator who might take kind of that as a precautionary tale, like this legislator isn't supporting this, their constituents are really upset, maybe I should support this because I don't want the same reaction as that, you know? So there's some different dynamics that go into engaging your legislator on social media, but it can be a really good option. And then finally, the other thing that you can do is engage your legislator in letters to the editor. This is by far the most passive way, and it doesn't guarantee that your legislator sees it. But a lot of legislators do read their local newspaper to see what people are talking about. So you could write a letter to the editor mentioning your legislator and a stance that they took on an issue or a bill that you really want them to vote for, and you can get their attention that way. This also serves kind of the same purpose as social media, where it's a lot more public, right? So a lot more other people are going to see it. So again, if you really want to not only get your legislator's attention, but maybe your neighbor's attention as well about an issue, this is a good way to engage both of those at the same time. So now you know where to contact your legislator, you know who your legislator is. Let's talk a little bit about what you should say, right, when you contact your legislator. So I love what you see on your screen. This is called a handy guide to talking to your legislator, and it's a really great outline of what you need to say when you engage with them. So they use your hand as an example you see here, and each finger is kind of like a bullet point that you can remember when you're in a meeting with them. So you don't need to bring like notes or anything. So your first finger is where you want to start. Make sure you say your name, where you live, and mention that you're a constituent. A constituent means that this person represents you, that you live in their district. If you are not a constituent, they are not going to take you seriously, and they probably won't meet with you or anything like that, because again, it's not their job to represent you, it's their job to represent their constituents. So stating that you're a constituent gives you kind of the seriousness you need to be taken seriously. The second finger that you're going to use is you're going to just say what your issue is. So it's as simple as, saying, I'm here to talk to you about the bill that would expand access to comprehensive sex education across Minnesota. Your third finger there is why it's important to you. And you can see that this third finger leads right to your palm, and in the palm is your personal story. This is the thing that you should always keep in the palm of your hand to use whenever it feels good, because this is really the meat and the heart of what you're going to say. So your personal story is why this personally affects you. Why is this important to you? Why do you care enough to be engaging your legislator about it? So if you're talking about that comprehensive sex education bill that I just used as an example, you might be like, this is really important to me because I'm a parent of a young woman who is about to go into high school, and I just don't feel like she has all the information she needs to live a safe and healthy life. You could talk about, like, this is important to me because this was my experience with sexual and education, and it wasn't enough, and I was very unprepared when I started to date, and I didn't know what a healthy relationship looked like, and I didn't know what consent was. So whatever it is, you want to share your personal story. Your fourth finger is why the legislators should care. So, like, they know why you care. Why should they care? So you can talk about how comprehensive sex education has been shown to decrease rates of unintended pregnancies. You could talk about the societal impacts it has. You know, this is kind of like broadening the issue outside of just you and talking about why the legislators should care. And then finally, your fifth finger is the ask. Every conversation you should do or you should have should end in an ask. And so there's a couple different things you can ask. You can ask, like, will you support whatever bill you're talking to? It helps if you know the bill number. There's always a bill number attached to a bill. They always start in the House with HF, which stands for House File, and in the Senate with SF, which stands for Senate File. And then it usually has like a 4-digit number after that. If you know the bill number, make sure to say that, because that'll help them like look it up and help them get more information about it if they choose to. If you want a copy of this worksheet, it is available at the link on your screen as well. So, now that you know kind of what to say, where to say it, who to say it to, you might be thinking like, okay, I'm feeling prepared. Now I just need to figure out what the bills are, which is one of the hardest things, I think. Knowing when an issue is up, who is kind of like leading it, where does it stand, is it my time to speak to my legislator? I don't know. So the last thing that I want to go over with you today is just how to stay up to date. There are a lot of different organizations out there that work on all the issues that you care about. I highly suggest signing up for their email lists. They will keep you up to date with bills that are going on in the legislature, especially if they do legislative advocacy. They'll let you know kind of like where they are, kind of what they are, the bill numbers, what you should be looking out for. Similarly, if you want to get really plugged in, volunteer with one of those organizations. Again, by volunteering, you will stay plugged into what's going on in their world in the legislature. Follow these organizations on social media. So many of them have big presences on Twitter or Facebook, Instagram. Follow them. They usually will post like updates on bills or breaking news or things like that. Attend events too. A lot of organizations or candidates or your representatives have events where they talk about what's going on in the legislature, kind of like what bills you need to look out for, what are people talking about, that kind of thing. The other thing that I highly recommend is to sign up for your legislator's newsletter. You can usually do this on that Minnesota legislative website that I showed you earlier. If you click on their name, it'll usually bring them to it'll usually bring you to their page, and then you can sign up for a newsletter usually through there. They will send out newsletters not super often, but every once in a while with updates on what's kind of going on, what their priorities are, what they're thinking about, and that can be a really good opportunity to stay engaged with them virtually. And then finally, if you're a Twitter user, great source for information is the hashtag MNLeg, which sounds silly, but it's short for legislator. A lot of news coverage happens through this hashtag. Representatives and senators use this hashtag. Advocacy groups use this hashtag. So you can really stay up to date with really insider information about what's going on in the legislature through this hashtag as well. So, with that, that is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for joining me for these, 15 or so minutes we've had. And I appreciate everything you're doing, and I hope you will reach out to your legislator to engage them in conversation about the issues that you care about.